The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can take them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is Father, and I are one." The Gospel of the Lord. I'd like to begin this morning by playing for you all a very short oldie but a goodie. Don't worry, it's not what you think. Listen.
Oh, thank you, Lord, for yourself too. And I know the cause of deep love. Let manna to our souls be given. The bread of life sent down from heaven. Amen.
Well, I think some of you probably recognize the melody and the words. But did the voice mean anything to you? Didn't think so. I can't tell you how it feels for me to hear that voice here. I have to say it touches me very, very deeply. That's the voice of my grandma, the tender age of 94, singing Grace at Thanksgiving dinner. And even though we had the blessing of 5 more Thanksgivings with her after that, I'm really glad I recorded her. I know that voice. And though it wasn't special to any of you, I recognize it. And I can follow it back through some 50 years of memories. Voice recognition is a very powerful element of our consciousness. Whether we're sheep or human beings, its capability to guide us, to warn us, cannot be denied. A familiar voice can often comfort us in our memories. One of my many years down the street at Yucaipa Elementary School, I had a very attentive group of 5th graders. At the end of a very exciting assembly in a stuffy auditorium on a rainy day, no less, the principal, without thinking, dismissed all 600 or so kids at one time. Chaos ensued, and I knew that there was no way they were going to get out of that room without somebody getting trampled. I raised my teacher voice and said, "Room 18," with my finger pointed skyward, and soon I had a line of 30 students waiting to be escorted back to class. Other teachers did the same thing, and thankfully there were no injuries. So my sheep heard me, and they followed me. Our day-to-day existence can be like walking through a busy marketplace in a foreign country where you don't speak the native language. You hear swirls of sound and shout and clamor and distraction, and then suddenly your ears pick out a voice speaking your language, maybe even in a song being blasted out of a loudspeaker, and you feel some sense of relief just hearing something, anything that makes sense to you. And this is how life sometimes feels. Sometimes we hear a lot of noise, a lot of calls, and we're not certain which way to turn or look. At other times, we hear the voice of a parent or a friend, even the voice of a deceased loved one on a recording, and our response is instantaneous and trusting. Well, the relationship between a shepherd and his sheep is no different. In biblical times, shepherds would combine their herds at night for protection against predators and thieves. When dawn would come, they'd call to their own, and the flock would instantly separate by shuffling off in the direction of their shepherd. The sheep truly did know the voice of their own shepherd, and the shepherd knew his sheep, and they followed him. And that's what we hear in the gospel today. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, knows us, and we recognize his voice. But never having heard the actual voice of Jesus the way you're hearing mine right now, what does that mean for us? Well, it's more than just air being forced across your vocal cords. It touches us in a deeper way. Voice expresses a person's sense of self, his or her being. So perhaps we hear it with our hearts instead of just our ears. In a recent article of USA Weekend magazine, I read that not only during Holy Week or Easter season, but at any moment, any time of the year, can be one where you listen to God and God listens to you. The article went on to suggest that most people don't even know the depth of their own spirituality. Contributing to this report was Father James Martin, an editor from the weekly Catholic magazine, America. He mentions that there are 6 ways for us to assess our spiritual awareness, 6 ways to recognize God's voice calling to us. Number 1, you feel incomplete. See, your wish for something more might be a sign of your desire for God's fulfilling presence. Number 2, you're wistful. Do you ever look at a sunrise and feel some kind of connection with something beyond yourself? Experiences like this can reveal your natural desire for God, which is one way that God attracts us. Number 3, you feel grateful. When you feel thankful for something as simple as a conversation with an old friend, this can point to an underlying awareness of God's goodness. Number 4, holiness. When you read about holy men and women, people like Mother Teresa or St. Francis of Assisi, and you find yourself wanting to be more like them, that's God calling to the holiness within you. Number 5, clarity. When you have even fleeting feelings that you're right where you should be and that life suddenly makes sense, that can be a sign of God's encouragement to you. And number 6, vulnerable. When you're sick or struggling, you often feel a greater need for God, but God isn't any closer at those times. You're just more open to hearing His voice in times of trouble. So, our challenge today is to hear the voice of Jesus, to recognize and then follow it. It'd be nice if we lived in a world like that of the early shepherds, one free of commotion and disturbance like we've become so accustomed to. But are we listening, truly listening? We need to take the time and effort to listen for the shepherd's voice in our lives, in our prayers, to hear His voice coming through the voice of others as the means of showing His love and concern. Would it help us to occasionally make an effort to remove ourselves from that noise that can prevent us from hearing more clearly? There are many voices competing for our attention in this world. But to which one shall we listen? The one whose authority truly shapes and guides us, the one that leads His flock to eternal life. If today you hear His voice, harden not your heart. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me." Listen. Follow.